Hey everybody, today we are debating the classic debate of creation versus evolution, and we're starting right now. Okay, so basically, ladies and gentlemen, stoked to have you here. I am going to basically switch over in a second. We are just moving over to our panned view, and now we have our format for the debate. So thank you for your patience. Glad you are here. And without any further ado, I want to introduce the debaters. So, okay. Anyway, sorry, Jared just scared me for a second. Basically, we have Standing for Truth. He's been here before, and he is back again wanting to debate creation versus evolution. Standing for Truth is represented on the left side. And Standing for Truth, glad you are here. Your link is down in the description. Anybody who wants to check it out, you can check out Standing for Truth's link. And I want to let you know as well that Jared's link will be in the description as well. Standing for Truth, if you want to share what you've been up to at your channel, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, James. I love it every time I come on. You got a great channel here. You're a great moderator, unbiased, to both parties. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Jared, thanks so much for participating in this debate. Hopefully lots more to come. I mean, I really support this channel. I've got nothing bad to say. So all in all, thanks so much for having me on, James. I've got a lot of new material on my channel. Hopefully everyone can go check that out. Me and a few fellow creationists made a series debunking Aaron Ra's phylogeny challenge. So I feel it's irrefutable. We'll see if he ever gets to it, but check that out. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, awesome. Thanks, James.
Yeah, my pleasure. And with that, Jared, if you want to share what you have been up to at your channel, that is linked down in the description for everybody. Jared, thanks for being here, buddy.
Yeah, I run the channel Patient Beard on YouTube. There's no content on it, but I have a lot of participation in other people's channels, mainly in James's channel. It's really a little bit more of a hobby for me, but I'm trying to do it a little bit more. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and like to thank my opponent for showing up. And it'll be a good discussion.
You bet. Just moving away from the vacuum, they surprised me with the cleaning crew. So I am going to basically hide in my shared office. I try to do it in a public spot because I share this office, and so I hope my office mate doesn't come by, otherwise he'd be in for a surprise. But until the vacuum is gone, we're going to be here for this debate. So I'm excited to get started. It's going to be a formal debate. I know a lot of people are like, oh, but I dig the informal. Don't worry, we have cross-examination, which is going to be epic. Very excited about that. And I think the nice thing about having a formal debate with timed sections is the debaters agreed on it, so it's really out of my hands anyway. But the good things about it are that there's no questioning whether or not people have an equal amount of time on each side. So that's one good thing. And the second thing is, even though sometimes people worry that they're talking past each other, a debater can of course mention in their statements when one of their points hasn't been addressed. So that's fair game, just like in an open discussion. With that, we will have 10-minute openings, 8-minute rebuttals, 8-minute cross-examination, followed by a 5-minute closing, followed by Q&A. So if you have a question, just give me an @ModernDayDebate in the chats, or if you want to be sure that your question will be asked in our time limits, Super Chat will always be read at the very start of the Q&A, so you can always do that, and we're reinvesting that back into the channel. Basically, better software that we're shooting for, as it seems like every day we have a little glitch, but don't worry about it. We're going to make it. So, thanks for being here, and with that, I am setting the timer. So, gentlemen, when you are ready, namely when our good friend Standing for Truth is ready, because he'll be taking the affirmative, I'm going to start it on your first word, Standing for Truth. And with that, your 10-minute opening statement is ready. And for those of you who are new here, please feel free to hit that subscribe button as we have debates every week. And hopefully we'll get to have these gentlemen back on, because I could tell you, worked with them before and they're a pleasure. So with that, standing for truth, if you want to kick us off, I'll go start the clock on your first word.
Awesome, James. Well, let me figure out how to share this screen real quick. I think you got to. I should just wait for this to evolve. I mean, since according to fish to fisherman evolution, things are supposed to get better on their own. So just give me another 4.6 billion years here, James. We should be good to go. Oh, here we go. If can you see the share?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Oh, and all these programs, the computers, satellites, they're just primitive compared to even one single cell. So I really do admire the great faith of the evolutionists, James. So let's get started here. Origins debate, biblical creation versus atheistic evolution. You know what? Molecules to man evolution, it's going to have to explain how the four-dimensional genome with multiple overlapping codes and chock full of meta information came about. Sorry to break it to the evolutionists who want to believe so badly that, you know, pine trees, whales, and carrots are all related through common ancestry, because evolution has been falsified. When you're trying to compensate for loss of information, normally single point mutations that are acting in the genome don't add up to the type of information that is being degraded. A single point mutation can kill a gene, but it's extremely hard to improve a gene unless you can change strings of nucleotides. And this is a rock solid paper. 10,000 scientists have went over it. No serious critique, no serious rebuttal. Evolution has been falsified. Random letters in the alphabet don't have information, but if you start to put them together, you can build information. We need words to enhance or compensate a genome. And this brings us to this very important paper, the waiting time problem. Now, biologically realistic numerical simulations revealed in this paper that a population of this type required inordinately long waiting times to establish even the shortest nucleotide strings. To establish a string of 2 nucleotides required an average 84 million years. To establish a string of 5 nucleotides required an average 2 billion years. We found that waiting times were reduced by higher mutation rates, this paper says, stronger fitness benefits, and larger population sizes. However, even using the most generous feasible parameter settings, the waiting time required to establish any specific nucleotide string within this type of population was consistently prohibitive. This is why the evolutionists, they hope, they dream, they imagine. Evolution only happens in the imagination of the evolutionists. And the conclusion of this paper is that they've shown that the waiting time problem is a significant constraint on the macro evolutionary goo to you type of evolution of the classic hominin population. Routine establishment of specific beneficial strings of 2 or more nucleotides becomes very problematic. And like I said, this paper's rock solid, no serious critique. Now let's go for the jugular, the fatal blow to the so-called best evidence for goo to you evolution. For one, phylogenetic systematics is based on a primary assumption that universal common ancestry is true. And since what we know about genetics proves that it's not true, well, using phylogenetic systematics as an argument is circular. Now, the evolutionists will claim human to chimpanzee genetically identical by 98 to 99%. Now, this data is based on preferential and selective treatment of data. Cherry-picked data. They use sequences they expect to be similar. That's why it's cherry-picked. They do not include non-aligned DNA, gaps, copy number variations, and size differences. Actual genetic identity is only about 88% or even lower. To put this into perspective, this is 400 million DNA differences that actually exist between the 2 species. More fatal blows to the evolutionary theory. Most or nearly all of the secular research reports on human chimp DNA similarity omit significant amounts of data that do not align with each other. There is significant DNA sequence discontinuity between the 2 genomes that evolution cannot explain or account for. What is the reality? Look at my slide here. Humans are not apes, and they were created separately and uniquely in the image of God. Not only does the Bible prove this, but so does DNA evidence. evolutionary claim, human chromosome fusion number 2, arose through a fusion of two ape-like ancestors. The alleged site where the fusion supposedly took place actually represents a highly organized functional gene. And there's also a lack of evidence for a cryptic centromere site. Another evolutionary claim, shared genetic mistakes, aka pseudogenes, prove evolution. Sorry for the evolutionists. Pseudogenes are now known to be functional DNA elements and not mistakes. Junk DNA has been overturned. We understand less than 5% of the DNA language. We have only begun to discover just how functional the human genome is, and it's mind-boggling, it's flabbergasting how many experiments would be required to conclude with any level of confidence that a particular set of DNA sequences has absolutely no function. It comes down to preliminary biochemical evidence. The trajectory is strong for genome-wide function because it does not only exist for the known functional pseudogenes, but also for at least 80% of all the pseudogenes in humans. And given the known data, it is obvious that the other 20% may still yet to be found to be functional in some human tissue or even under some physiological condition that has yet to be studied thoroughly. Many non-coding RNA genes, such as pseudogenes, are only expressed under certain conditions. Now, if we look at the specific genetic markers that they can use, let's look at the beta globin pseudogene. Well, contrary to what evolutionists would have you believe, this pseudogene is not a useless genomic fossil. According to evolutionary predictions, this gene appears to be a highly functional and conveniently integrated feature of the human genome that is intolerant to mutation. They'll say broken remnants of an ancient chicken gene. No such remnant actually exists, and instead the fragment appears to be a functional DNA element. The famous Gulo pseudogene. Evolutionists use a minute amount of highly selective data, which represents only a small piece of the entire Gulo gene.
Can I pause the time for a second and ask you a question?
Usually, with it being formal.
Generally, you present evidence that supports your side. He's not presenting evidence of creation. He's not presenting his model of creation. He's spending his entire opening statements debunking my side, which is generally reserved for the not the cross examination, the counter.
If that's your question, we're getting to that. This all establishes my model. Are we good to continue?
Yeah, we'll definitely, Jared, you'll definitely have time to address it both in your intro or rebuttal or the cross-examination. Just because normally for the formal, we usually do have the timed sections.
I know, that's why I asked you to pause the time, because it didn't make sense to me that he hasn't even started to present his model. He's just gone against what I haven't presented yet.
Okay, that's fair.
No problem. It's coming. It's all part of it.
Okay.
And in your time, if you think that he's using a fallacious argument, like a non sequitur or anything like that, that's you're definitely able to say that during your time too. So,
I know. I just wanted to know what his model was, and
how many more minutes do I have, James?
Got about 3.5.
Okay, perfect. Just let me know when we're good to go.
You bet. Okay, restarting it in 3, 2, 1.
Now, data is significantly consistent in this Gulo pseudogene that they are independent events. Cherry-picked data. We go on to the word evolution. Now, that can have many different meanings. No one disagrees with a change in allele frequency over time, but it's about whether or not that change has limits. Now, mutations, they're not construction, they're destruction. And my model comes down to genome degradation. And at the end of the day, we see genomic degradation on a population level and on a personal level. For numerous reasons, if we're looking at beneficial mutations, which are the engine of molecules to man evolution, they cannot compensate for the relentless influx of deleterious mutations. And the evolutionists don't realize that there's limits to the beneficial mutations, and deleterious mutations are pouring in faster than they can be removed. We're going down, not up. This is consistent with a biblical model based on the fall. We would expect genome degradation. We would expect genetic entropy. We would also expect entropy on a universal level in regards to the second law of thermodynamics. This is all consistent with a biblical-based model, but not consistent with a model of evolutionary. Now, genetic entropy, it's not been refuted, contrary to what many evolutionists will say, because they'll use arguments of the obvious. Beneficials happen, selection happens, adaptation happens. Anybody with a basic understanding of genetics understands and knows these things. The argument of genetic entropy only begins after acknowledging these things. And this is strong confirmation of a biblical-based model. Now, he's going to have to show us a mechanism that adds new, novel, and meaningful information to the genome. It's all about net gain versus net loss. And due to the influx of deleterious mutations, he's going to have a problem here because the rare occurrence of beneficial mutations cannot compensate for the information loss. Linkage groups, they only get degenerate. They only get worse. Now, at the end of the day here, when we look at natural selection is only going to get rid of the most detrimental mutations and amplify only the best mutations, but it's those low impact mutations that are building up in the genome. So what do we know? Rare beneficial mutations cannot and will not compensate for the relentless influx of deleterious mutations. Evolution, as I said in the beginning, has been falsified, and the evidence points to a biblical-based model. Examples of beneficial mutations that they could use: gene duplications, universally deleterious. Decay of prior information is not going to take your fish to fishermen. Rescue devices, mutation count mechanisms, synergistic epistasis, not going to explain the net loss versus net gain. Now, here's the evidence for genomic degradation. We see it everywhere. We see it in the hobbits, Neanderthal. We see it in bacteria. Mammoth populations were highly inbred. We got all the papers, the sources here, for example. Here's Neanderthal, 40% less fit than modern humans. All the bones we find in the dirt is actually more consistent with a biblical-based model. Also, Homo erectus suffered from reductive evolution. We see Homo naledi suffer from reductive evolution. We see everything consistent with a biblical-based model. Mammoth populations, as I said, were highly inbred and carried an elevated genetic load. And all this evidence of degeneration, all this evidence of genetic entropy would be consistent with a biblical-based model. And the funny thing is, functional DNA, what I was talking about earlier with genome-wide functionality, is consistent with a biblical model. And even if the genome was only 10% functional, still falsifies evolution. So all the evidence, as I've shown, verifies a biblical model and falsifies an evolutionary model. So I'd like to see his model and how he explains that data. Thanks so much.
So thank you, gentlemen, both. We are off to the races. So I'm going to set the clock, start a timer, and this will be on your first word whenever you're ready, Jared.
Okay. I still find it interesting you didn't actually present any evidence for your model. We know that evolution happens. There's over 7 different fields of study that confirm that evolution happens. And what my opponent, well, he didn't really describe anything from his model. What I hear commonly from the young Earth creationist model is they always describe this variation between kinds that they use to explain it. And my only point with that is that is evolution. It's just their version of it has this magical arbitrary barrier. So I guess since he hasn't really presented a model, then let's, I was prepared to point out like we have a lot of different fields of study, like the laryngeal nerve in the study of anatomy. It takes the same path in all species that it exists in. That path is a straight line in a fish. That path, it goes all the way down the neck of a giraffe, wraps around the heart, and goes back up to the voice box. That's just a single example from the scientific field of the study of anatomy. I forget the exact term of the field. I should have written it down. My other piece of evidence, I guess, is that you're not a genetic clone of your mother or your father. So we both agree that evolution happens. The only difference we have is overcoming this arbitrary kinds barrier that prevents it from going outside of whatever this kinds barrier actually is. So I'm going to yield the remainder of my time for the cross-examination because he hasn't presented a model, so I don't feel the need to present a very strong one.
You bet. And Jared yields his roughly about 7.5 minutes. So next we will move into the 8-minute rebuttals, and I will start the clock on your first word, Standing for Truth.
Awesome, thanks so much. Well, the fact that he has the inability to understand that that was a model based on genetic, maybe he's not aware of genetic entropy, maybe he's not aware that of these papers that have falsified the theory of universal common descent, but that's fine. I'll have some fun here. In the 7 fields of study, like astronomy, genetics, geology, and so on that he talks about, all assume evolution before initial investigations. So, for example, the assumption of uniformitarianism. And obviously, he didn't address any of the evidence that I've provided for genome-wide degradation. And the thing is, you're not going to take your fish to fisherman by losing money. Hey, you know what? How are you going to get rich by losing money? At the end of the day, he's going to have to explain that. If we look at genetics, as I've demonstrated here, confirms the biblical creation model. If we look at the, I can hear some typing there. I'm not too sure if...
Oh, I apologize.
That is exactly. But the whole point of genetic entropy and why it is a strong model for us would be the fact that the Bible records a time when people had extremely long lives. So this is very consistent with the fall, as I've said. I'm not sure if he was listening or not, but at the end of the day, the most rational and logical conclusion based on this data is that this data is real, and human life expectancy based on the fact that the Bible records a time when people had extremely long lives was once hundreds of years, but has progressively declined to current values. And the most obvious and apparent explanation for such declining lifespans would be genetic degeneration due to mutation, deleterious accumulation mutation. And once again, that's consistent with the biblical-based model. This is what we know to be true in regards to empirical data. And at the end of the day, that is inconsistent with a evolutionary model. If you look at the 3 major haplogroups, for example, that point us directly, we can see that the history of humanity is in our genome, and this is empirical data. What we know about mitochondrial DNA, for example, of humans fits the 6,000-year timescale, explains the 3 major haplogroups and the relative differences between pre- and post-flood humanity. It's a marker of time. It's 3 independent lines of evidence fit exactly what we see in the mitochondrial DNA. And you know what? It's too close for comfort when it comes to evolutionists, because at the end of the day, biblical Adam and Eve predictions, we see that there's low genetic diversity among humans, 0.5% difference between humans, and evolutionists have to look at that data, and they'd have to go to a rescue device of a bottleneck when it's very consistent with a biblical-based model. We know there's one Y chromosome ancestor, 1 mitochondrial DNA ancestor, plus the 3 major haplogroups that take us directly to Noah's 3 wives. Most genes come in 2 versions. Noah's flood predictions, well, all people are closely related. We know that based on genetics, like I just said, and only a few mitochondrial DNA lines, the Y chromosome line, and evidence of rapid population growth. So it's everywhere. And what we know about DNA differences, mitochondrial mutation rates, for example, nuclear DNA differences, we can look to our model of created heterozygosity hypotheses as both testable and falsifiable. If you have heterozygous ancestors, an almost limitless variety of combinations of chromosomes, genes, and traits are possible. In the biblical creation model, we look to recombination and gene conversion. They're going to provide many new varieties of combination of traits quickly, since, as I just said, these differences are already built in. And at the end of the day, with these heterozygous, with these pre-existing DNA differences, functional DNA differences, which is actually being demonstrated and proven based on ENCODE, for example, which I went over in my opening presentation. So the evidence is everywhere. The model is strong, and he's going to have to address those things. And in regards to the heterozygous organism, visible distinctiveness in the offspring, it's going to be quick. So there's no problem there at all. At the end of the day, if we look at the nested hierarchies, for example, that fits a design model perfectly. And I think junk DNA, the fact that junk DNA has been overturned, and the fact that this non-protein coding DNA functions much like a computer, it's involved in regulatory functions, for example, when and how fast to make specific proteins, embryonic development, even the ERVs, the endogenous retroviruses, is now consistent with a biblical-based model. They're having roles in the placenta, in the embryo, and the thing is, for the evolutionists to say that, you know, this preliminary data is not enough to conclude genome-wide functionality, well, comprehensive knockout experiments for a mammal, not sure if Patient Beard's aware of this, but they've yet to be performed. So it's premature to make the claim that the majority of non-coding DNA would be non-functional. And what we know about beneficial mutations and how they're overwhelmingly deleterious, and what we know about rescue devices such as convergent evolution, I mean, it falsifies evolution, and everything's consistent with a biblical-based model, both in genetics, both in geology, for example. And I think the only other thing here would be the barrier and the limit. I mean, is there a barrier? Is there a limit to the change? You know, are you going to get a dog as big as an elephant? We know there's animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant. Maybe you can answer that. Are we going to get a dog as small as a flea? There's insects as small as a flea, like a flea. So I think in regards to the change, the limit in the change would be more consistent with a biblical-based model. And for example, the giraffe, the laryngeal nerve he's talking about, that would be an example, I believe, if I'm understanding him correctly, based on the bad design argument. And he's using that to counter a lot of the evidence for good design. And it's an argument from ignorance, too. It's a logical fallacy, because the giraffe, for example, has not been comprehensively tested yet. So it's just like many other examples that show bad design in the end turn out to actually be great design. Look at the vestigial organs that have been overturned. Junk DNA has been overturned, as I've demonstrated here. And like the eye, where the wires, for example, or nerves are in front, but later on eye experts have now concluded and realized that the wires or nerves at their present configuration are actually great design after all. So eye experts have even debunked famous evolutionists like Richard Dawkins. So at the end of the day, using an argument from bad design is really a bad argument. It's a logical fallacy. It misunderstands our model of death, decay, degeneration after the fall. So like I said, this is confirmation of the model. I'd like to see him address all this evidence for genomic degradation, this entropic degeneration on all levels, epigenetic level as well. We see Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, asthma, autoimmune diseases, cancers, immunological diseases. You can look to someone like Bill Ludlow, who looks to all these hominid species. And at the end of the day, what we see is the fact that Neanderthal was highly inbred. Hobbits, for example, suffered from reductive evolution. The Naledi, Homo erectus were both highly inbred, suffered from reductive evolution. Lenski's experiment, I mean, we see bacteria producing bacteria, whales are producing whales, dogs are producing dogs, and he wants us to believe that dogs, whales, and bacteria are related through common ancestry. I need to see some evidence for that, because all the evidence is consistent with a biblical-based model. How much time, brother?
Got about 50 seconds left.
And if we look to the Lenski experiment, for example, there was adaptation seen in these beneficial mutations. For example, a lot of them were reductive, loss of function, loss of promoter, loss of genes, and this adaptation was largely accomplished by means of loss of function and loss of regulation mutations. So what we see with natural selection acting upon random mutations, random variation, we'd expect that given a model of pre-existing genetic diversity. I mean, why would God create clones? Obviously, he would have created Adam and Eve with pre-existing DNA differences, and these confirmations have been confirmed, and they're making testable and falsifiable predictions. And look to the paper, the waiting time problem that I talked about earlier. I mean, I'd like to see him address that as well. Haldane's dilemma. I mean, evolution's dead. You can still believe in it. It's a science fiction religion. It's not science. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for both debaters as we move now to Jared's rebuttal. So I'm going to set the clock. And so, Jared, on whenever you're ready, I'll start it on your first word.
Okay. What I still haven't heard was any evidence. I just heard you repeating a lot of the claims that basically evolution is wrong. And I mean, you make the claim that it's been falsified, and you claim that there's a paper that like 10,000 scientists who agree with. I'd like a link to that, because last time I checked, nobody in the scientific field took genetic entropy seriously. My point about the laryngeal nerve was that it makes the same path in every animal that has it. In a human, instead of going 3 inches down to the voice box, it goes down, it wraps around your aorta, and then it comes back up. And in fish that have that, it goes and it makes a straight path. This acts as evidence for evolution under the anatomical field of study, because it's looking at similarities that we can actually see when we look at these things. There was no creation model presented other than evolution is wrong, which is like me trying to say I can run a 3-minute mile by first proving that you can't. So I don't really know what, where, I mean, I guess you could say from his point of view that, God created him that way, but I mean, God's just a deus ex machina. He's just solves all conflicts to the problems. So, I mean, you can just fit him in anywhere you need to with a hypothesis like creationism. And he made the claim that the data is cherry picked and incorrect. And the thing about science is if you can demonstrate that the data is incorrect or that the experiment's incorrect, you could win a Nobel Prize for that. So that if you haven't won a Nobel Prize yet, I mean, we've got over 200 years of evidence that we've been using in the field of evolution. And not a single piece has falsified the theory yet. And all we seem to do is keep piling more evidence onto what we already know about it. We know more about that single theory than we do about electricity and magnetism. And we use those things to build computers. So I guess I say that I trust, the scientific consensus when they say that they have this data, because we can use what we learn in science to build computers and all kinds of technology. So the proof of any theory is in its usefulness. I always hate it when people compare computers to DNA. They're nothing alike. They don't even function anywhere near similarly. And it shows a complete lack of understanding of both DNA and computers. I just wish people would stop making that comparison. I mean, even to the layman, it gives a bad analogy. It just doesn't work. So yeah, those are his points that I wrote down to counter against. Really, I'm ready for Q&A.
You bet. So thank you for that, Jared. And for our next section, we actually, if you remember, the cross-examination is next. And so this is also a great opportunity, like I mentioned, so you can ask Standing for Truth if you think he really did present a model. So that's fair game. And I'm going to start the clock. Given that we have started with the affirmative, namely Standing for Truth, Standing for Truth will let you, in this alternating order, start the cross-examination. Sorry, I just totally drew a blank. Okay, thanks for your patience. So setting the timer, and I will start it on your first word, Standing for Truth.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much there, Jared, for your presentation and rebuttal there. I guess my first question would be in regard to complexity and intelligent programming. So, for example, we know Microsoft uses intelligent programmers and complex codes to create the Windows operating system, right? However, information in DNA, we know, is millions of times more dense and complex. Like one single cell is more complicated than the space shuttle. So my question would be, how could the process of evolution using natural processes and chance solve the problem of complex information sequencing without intelligence? Go ahead.
Without intelligence? Natural selection?
Yes.
You just start with a single self-replicating molecule, and once you have that, it's evolution and natural selection.
So what would be your definition of evolution then, if you're going to throw that word out there?
I like the one you presented earlier, a change in allele frequencies over time, which effectively just means that the next generation's DNA is going to be different from the previous generation's DNA. I think that's a pretty good one to use.
Sure. So I guess if we agree that, biological evolution at least would mean a change in allele frequency or gene pool in populations over time. I mean, I'm not contesting that type of microevolutionary variation, where you get this change in the frequency of the expression of different traits, not really disputed. But at the end of the day, do you believe there's a limit to the change, a barrier, for example? Like, do you believe we can get a dog as big as an elephant? We know there's animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant, right? Do you believe there's physical limits, genomic limits? Go ahead.
Well, when you're talking about evolution, you're talking about changes over, a very large number of generations. When we experiment with, evolution in the lab, we use very, very short-lived species. And so, for example, if you had dogs, you could probably get a dog as big as an elephant. In theory, if you were selectively breeding, for larger and larger dogs, I think that you would start getting, you would definitely start getting to limits where, your dog wouldn't survive in the wild because you're, like I said, artificially selecting them. If the environmental pressures were there, and the larger dog did better over time, then yeah, it's theoretically possible because we have elephants. We know that biological animals can get that big. And so, you wouldn't be able to just like enlarge a dog's frame the way they have it now, but like over many generations, with the right direction in deciding which genes make the next generation, you could get there. But you're talking thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of generations. You're not, Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, a lot of storytelling, for example, a lot of hypothesizing. I mean, we don't see this, right? I mean, evolution, this type of evolution, it seems to happen in the imagination of those that want to actually believe in it. Because if you're looking at the type of evolution, we've agreed upon, the change in allele frequency in populations over time or generations, for example, that's going to explain the survival of the fittest. I'm not arguing with that, but is it going to explain the arrival of the fittest? So my question would be, do you believe that type of evolution, explains the major innovations, the major origin events, for example, of say major new forms of life?
I'm going to answer that with a question. Just out of curiosity, do you think dogs have a common ancestor?
Oh, for sure. I would say that, domestic dogs, wolves, coyotes, I'm sure that they all are related through common ancestry. I think that's testable.
Okay,
I think that's.
So then to answer your question, how come you're willing to accept it backwards? You're willing to look in the past and say dogs have diverged from the common wolf, but when you want to go to the future and you say, can we get a hypothetical animal when we have an example of a similar hypothetical animal, you call it storytelling. Like, I guess to answer your question, why do you accept it going
I would say
generation, but you won't accept it going forward several generations?
One thing is that we usually, standing for truth, I have to be a little bit harder on you too, that like standing for truth, that you can keep it as quick, like briefly to questions as possible, and then Jared also, you'll have your chance to ask questions, but for now,
I know, but I'm asking the question as a direct answer to his question. He's asking me, he's trying to ask me why evolution, why I think evolution happens, or could I get an animal as big as a dog as big as an elephant? And I'm answering his question by pointing out that he accepts it going backwards, but he's not accepting it going forwards. It's the same process. So I'm trying to answer his question by pointing that out to him. I'm not trying to like take over his questions or anything.
Okay, if it's a rhetorical question, that's okay.
Okay.
So I'll go. Let me start the clock back up. So sorry for taking that time on you standing for truth. I'll give you like 10 seconds back. So go ahead, continue.
I think because when we look at, genetic differences, or we look at mitochondrial DNA differences, nuclear DNA differences, we can empirically demonstrate that, dogs and wolves are related, but, does that prove that dogs and banana plants are related? So for example, do you have an observable, demonstrable mechanism that actually, would add new novel information to the genome to take your, fish to fisherman, for example? Go ahead.
Not in front of me, but I know that it's been demonstrated in labs. I know that they like to use very short-lived species to, put in different environmental pressures, and then check the DNA, bacteria like small fruit flies and things like that, and then they track the DNA differences across these different generations, and they see how these differences add up in these animals that are in these particular species. So science has demonstrated this in a lab, but I don't have anything to point you to right now.
If you're referring to like flies or fruit flies or bacteria, for example, these short generation times, we can see almost hundreds of thousands of years of evolution in an observable time frame. So for example, if you look at, say, the bacterial experiment you might be referring to, Lenski, if a lot of these, mutations were based on...
Can I give you a different answer real quick? Are you familiar with...
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you familiar with ring species?
Yes.
Okay. So how does that not demonstrate that?
Well, I think it might be more appropriate if you ask me that during my cross-examination,
okay,
and I'll be more than happy to.
I guess my answer to your question would be ring species. That makes a little bit more sense
Well, I think here's my question. So if we're looking at these fly experiments, we're seeing a lot of, flies are producing a variety of flies, and in the bacterial experiments, bacteria are producing a variety of bacteria, and a lot of these changes are actually a loss of information. So how is that evidence for, large scale evolution if we're not actually seeing it even in these large scale experiments such as bacterial experiments? Go ahead.
But we do see it. It's there. They have evidence that DNA mutates. That doesn't just mean information goes away. Information gets added. Information gets swapped around. Information gets deleted. It's not a one-touch operation there.
And time. So sorry, standing for truth. That's the last one you get to ask. But we will now move into the cross-exam, where Jared will be asking questions toward standing for truth, who will be answering. So thanks for your patience, guys. Setting the timer for 8 minutes, and I will go on your first word, Jared.
Do I get my extra time I yielded earlier?
Yeah, putting it into cross-exam is like...
No, I don't. I think for the cross, it's just still 8 minutes, right?
Yeah,
it can be yielded to Q&A.
Sometimes we let people donate to Q&A, but it's like a little bit like, given that we didn't have everybody agree on it beforehand, it's hard to do. By the way,
fair enough.
When we do get to Q&A, are you guys okay with letting the other person respond to the other person's answer to each question? And by the way, audience,
I'm fine with that.
Okay, we have about 1 trillion questions for Standing for Truth, which is good. We want questions for Standing for Truth. But we have, I think, maybe 2 or 3 for Jared. It's
I gave like I gave like 7 minutes and 4 minutes to the Q&A, so that'll work out. We'll have a little time there.
Okay, and then the floor is yours, Jared. I'll start the clock on your first word.
All right. So tell me, how does disproving evolution act as evidence for creation?
Sure. Yeah. Like as I indicated earlier with the biblical base model, for example, in Genesis, it records the time where people had extremely
hold on a second.
long lives, and
you're not answering the question I asked you. I didn't ask you to.
I just don't think you like the answer that I'm giving you.
Well, no,
Because
I was trying to point out that it's a non sequitur. Okay, what you've basically done this whole debate is you have been trying to prove that you can run a 3-minute mile by first proving that I can't. That's what you've been doing the whole debate. So what I'm asking is how is,
you have a question?
Yeah. How is how is evolution being false actually act as a positive evidence for the biblical model?
So, for example, when we look at the biblical base model, we look at the creation event in Genesis, and we see that there was a time of extremely long lives, a time with very little mutation accumulation, and now that we see empirically that this fact of genome-wide degradation, this accumulation of mutations, if we actually take that back to a point of least genetic entropy, least genetic damage, well, that's actually consistent with the assumption or the worldview of biblical creation. And the thing is, when God created Adam and Eve,
but that's
and he
not
said,
just proving evolution, what you've just said.
See, the thing is, the loss of information, this accumulation of deleterious mutations, the fact that natural selection is not going to be able to stop this degeneration problem is actually consistent with a biblical-based model. I'm not too sure why you can't comprehend.
How does that
You're not going to go from a fish to fisherman by losing information. Because the thing is, there's only two models here, and if I'm disproving one, well, this one leaves the other one alone by itself. And if science is all about falsifying the other side, and something like genetic entropy or something like
science
what ENCODE has
about
revealed in our genome
side.
being mostly functional, that's consistent with the biblical creation model.
Science isn't about falsifying the other side. Science is about attempting to falsify your own position. If you can falsify your own position, the hypothesis is wrong. So,
for example, the gold standard of science is testable and falsifiable prediction. So if I look at genetics, for example, I'm not sure if you're familiar with mitochondrial DNA haplogroups and the fact that there's three major haplogroups.
All right. So what you're saying is I'm falsifying evolution, therefore creation is true. That's not how science works. Science says I have a hypothesis. I falsify or don't falsify my hypothesis.
Yes.
It doesn't say anything about competing hypotheses. So I've
given a hypothesis that the fact that, if you let me speak, I'll let you know. I've already said it, but I'll say it again. The fact that we know that human mitochondrial DNA differences divide into three major groups designated L, M, and N. Go look in the evolutionary literature. This is a fact.
Okay, I can accept for the sake of argument that is a fact. That does not get us to telling that doesn't demonstrate that that creation actually happened. That's just saying that evolution.
The thing is, it comes down to testable and falsifiable prediction. So what happened after the flood? Well, the earth was repopulated from, there's 8 people that came off the ark, Noah's 3 daughters-in-law. So the fact that there's 3 haplogroups, that's consistent with the model.
Predictions.
Confirmation right there.
It's my time. Could you please let me talk?
See, when you ask me a question, though, you got to let me answer the question.
No, I can cut you off when you're rambling and you're getting off topic. What falsifiable predictions does your creation model make that we can attempt to falsify?
Sure. So, for example, if we look at the created heterozygosity hypothesis, the idea that God created Adam and Eve with pre-existing functional DNA differences, if the majority of our genome is actually junk, as evolutionists used to assume it was, but now we know that preliminary evidence suggests that at least 80% is transcribed into RNA, that demonstrates that our model is strong and that it's not falsified. But if it actually was
you
mostly
just said
junk,
our model. You
it.
just presented a hypothesis and then told me that evolution was wrong again as proof of it.
No. I told you to falsify the model of created heterozygosity, created genetic diversity. We would expect.
But created genetic diversity is evolution.
Functional DNA differences. Does that make sense?
Created diversity is evolution.
I'll give you this time back, Jared. Sorry, forgive me. I hate cutting you off. Standing for Truth, if you're able to keep your questions as terse and pithy as possible. And then Jared, if you can try to remember to only ask questions, and forgive me, I haven't done a great job in this last couple of minutes, but thanks for your patience. And don't worry, I'll restart the clock when you start talking, Jared.
All right. Let's switch gears real quick. Are dogs a kind, or are they part of like the wolf kind?
I would say that, whether it's dogs, wolves, domestic dogs, you know what I mean? Like these animals are all part of one reproducing kind. So I think it's pretty obvious that they would be the same kind, but I wouldn't say that, say, domestic dogs and, pine trees or whales are the same kind. So we don't exactly know. These are all
to a very basic fundamental core part of the model.
Well, the thing is, if God created original created kinds, we would expect functionally unique differences separating, say, families. We look to families as the cutoff mostly for created kinds. So we actually, once again, look to the genome and what's functional and what's not. So that's how we can test that. We go to the
having a
genome.
common ancestor.
Because evolution would say that DNA differences across families would be functionally neutral.
Evolution is false. What prevents them from having a common ancestor? What in your creation model prevents them from having a common ancestor? Just that God created them?
Well, the fact that time only makes things worse based on genetic mutations, based on mutation accumulation. You're not going to have enough time to actually have anything more.
That's not a statement that science agrees with.
See, the thing is, if you actually look at DNA differences, the dog family, as we're talking about, they show little genetic differences among, say, the dog kind, as I'm using that word, or within the dog kind. So we can safely assume and conclude that they are within the same kind. So I think that that's empirically verified. But to say that dogs and banana plants or whales are of the same kind, well, then that's when you go outside of science and into what might be a science fiction religion.
What about bears? Are bears in the same family as dogs?
Bears would not be in the same family of dogs. No.
Okay, so that's
roughly 30 seconds.
You've stopped one more generation above dogs. One more common ancestor above dogs is your arbitrary limit for the canine family, basically, is what you're saying. Even though bears are...
Well, I would say genetic difference. I would say genetic differences, borderlines that we see, because there's an article, 90% of known species arose recently and at the same time. So that borderline, I would say, proves that they're not the same kind.
So this has been an engaging and exciting cross-examination. So thank you both for both your intros, rebuttals, and cross-exams. We'll have just closing statements before we move into the Q&A. And as a reminder for the Q&A, we've got a lot of great questions already, which is excellent. And with that, if you happen to have a question for Jared or Patient Beard, we will intersperse those with the questions for Standing for Truth. So in other words, like they'll get moved up significantly in the line. And if you happen to have any questions, like I said, for Jared, we will intersperse them with the questions for Standing for Truth, which are in the hundreds. Not really the hundreds, but there's a lot. And the only trick is comments or statements, like we definitely will read those off as super chats, but otherwise we tend to stick to just questions. If you can put your comment in the form of a question and start it with modern day debate, we will definitely include that as well. So with that, thanks for your patience. Starting the 5-minute clock and Standing for Truth, this is going to be your closing statement. So when the floor is yours, I will start the clock. Or when you say your first word, I'll start the clock.
Awesome. So, I'll start with the last thing he said in the cross-examination there, and then with bears and dogs, as I was trying to indicate, bears show lots of genetic differences from dogs, so it's pretty safe to assume they're different kinds. So that's a pretty easy refutation right there. And I'm kind of surprised why he doesn't understand everything that I'm saying about, mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, junk DNA being overturned, pre-existing genetic diversity, genetic entropy. I don't understand why he doesn't see why this not only confirms a biblical base model and is consistent with a biblical base model, but it also falsifies pond scum to people evolution. So it's a double whammy is exactly what it is. If you look at genetic entropy, genetic degradation, you just think of it this way. We have a genome of 3 billion letters, and you take out one letter, change one letter randomly. Are you going to have a huge fitness effect? It's going to have a tiny fitness effect. And in fact, it's like rust on a car. You can't see each rust event, but it's continuous and destructive. And I provided a multitude of evidence from bacteria, viruses, Homo neanderthalensis, Homo naledi, the hobbits, mammoth populations, cheetah populations, butterfly populations, genome-wide degradation everywhere. It cannot be denied. And that's why population geneticists even bring up rescue devices like synergistic epistasis, mutation count mechanism. Natural selection is not going to solve this problem of genome-wide degradation. And I ask everyone to look at this paper that I provided, this rock-solid paper, the waiting time problem. I mean, it's consistent, once again, with a biblical-based model, and it falsifies evolution. And if you look at junk DNA, he doesn't understand, obviously, that the fact that most evolutionists have assumed that the majority, based on evolutionary leftovers, based on genomic fossils, is junk. But ENCODE found that at least 80% of the non-coding DNA was transcribed into RNA. This suggests function, and this is consistent, as I was trying to explain to him, with the hypotheses of created functional DNA differences. Obviously, we don't expect God to have created clones of Adam and Eve. We would expect him to have created them with genetic functional DNA differences based on his command to be fruitful and multiply. So at the end of the day, we're still just beginning to understand the developmental process, how coding and non-coding DNA coordinate when, where, and how structures are sequentially put in place to produce a fully functional organism. So this 80% preliminary data is only logically going to go up. So more and more confirmation for our model. Genetics really does confirm a biblical-based model. And even if you want to look at, say, the global flood, if we look to catastrophic plate tectonics, for example, we got, continental sprint. And that would explain mountains, that would explain the Himalayas, for example, because continental drift is not going to be enough to explain that. And we have testable, falsifiable predictions even for this model. For example, the pre-flood ocean crust, based on this model, the CPT model, would have been dragged down into the mantle core. This is called subduction process. And the testable, falsifiable prediction to confirm this model, because he wants to talk about the hypotheses and it being confirmed, is this cold ocean crust should still be cold, since this occurred, according to our model, only thousands of years ago, even though it has descended into the deep, hot mantle. And seismic data, we now know from NASA, has revealed enormous slabs of cool rock under North America.
1 minute
so
left.
Down to the core itself, which should be warm, this is confirmation of, once again, the biblical-based model. How much time do I have?
We got about 52 seconds.
So at the end of the day, for his closing statement, I'm not too sure why he accepts a theory that has absolutely no evidence for it. I spent the first few minutes just destroying their very best evidence. Maybe he's trying to hide from God. I'm not too sure. 2 Peter 3 tells us that, in the last days, there's going to be scoffers, willingly ignorant, denying three things: the creation, the flood, and the coming judgment of Jesus Christ. So the fact that they fight so hard against a biblical-based model, even though all empirical evidence verifies this model and falsifies pond scum to people evolution, is confirmation of this prophecy written thousands of years ago. So at the end of the day, I don't have much more to say, because he really addressed absolutely nothing. I think anybody, even the atheist, can probably see this. Go back, watch my presentation. Left. Very consistent. Thanks so much, James.
Excellent, and just in time. So thank you very much, Standing for Truth. And Jared, excited for your closing as well. So we are starting the clock on your first word, Jared, and you have 5 minutes. That's right.
Okay. Well, I would like to start out by bringing up that no model was actually presented. What we've had is we've had a whole big non sequitur wherein evolution is false, therefore creation. Doesn't say which version of creation. I'm assuming the biblical model because he brings up the Bible. I mean, he didn't distinguish between that or the Norse version of creation or any of the other versions of creation. Just says that creation is a thing. Tells me that this creation model works off of this kind system, which he equates to families, and that there's some kind of variation between it. But he doesn't have any idea what the arbitrary barrier is that prevents a kind from diverging too much. It's just genetic entropy, which he's just brought up a whole bunch of scientific hypotheses that no serious scientists take seriously. So there's that. He brings up 2 Peter, and he says that in the last days that there will be scoffers, and I guess you could call me a scoffer if you want to. But I usually like the things that I believe in to be based in sound evidence. And at the end of the day, even if evolution is false, he hasn't presented a model. He hasn't presented any evidence for his model. And he has just kept on hanging on to this non sequitur that somehow, by proving that I can't run a 3-minute mile, that means that he actually can run a 3-minute mile without actually going out and taking the evidence that his model, is true or not. He hasn't presented a model, hasn't presented evidence for it, doesn't know basic fundamental facts about his model, like what a kind is. Let's see, what else have we discussed today? We have this design versus random argument that was brought up, and we have examples of poor design everywhere throughout nature. The testicles wrap around the ureter, which is what goes from the kidneys to the bladder, before they go back down. That's why the left testicle hangs, lower than the right. And the right hangs lower than the left. I forget which. We have all kinds of, we have the laryngeal nerve. We have something that just kind of worked, and therefore it makes, an 18-foot length in a giraffe. It's the longest single nerve in any living organism on the planet. And that's one of the reasons scientists don't believe giraffes can do more than just make barking noises. So we have, plenty of examples of bad design if it's not something that came about by chance here and just went with what worked. We have lots of evidence from anatomy. When we follow the laryngeal nerve through all of the animals that have it, it takes the same path. This demonstrates that they have a common ancestor because when the nerve developed, it developed in that common ancestor. More importantly, that common ancestor's population that then diverged and evolved separately. So he brought up at some point that the Bible proves that God created apes separate from humans, but he didn't present any evidence of that. So yeah, pretty much the scientific consensus holds that evolution is a fact, and we know more about it than we do about many other fields of science that we've used, and the proof is in our ability to make useful predictions from it.
30 seconds left.
So yeah, I just say it doesn't make any sense to have such a big non sequitur. Evolution is false, therefore creation is true. When that's all it is. It's just a leap. That's my time.
Gotcha. Thank you. And Jared donates another 5 seconds to the Q&A. So thank you. But we do have, the good thing is, because we have a lot of questions, which is awesome, this is going to be fun. The Q&A, I think, is one of the more exciting parts. It's more interactive. So for that, we do have 37 minutes and 5 seconds for the Q&A. So totally, we are excited to jump into this. And then just a reminder to the debaters, if you're able to keep your responses short and pithy, that is excellent, because that way we'll get through more and more questions. So thank you guys for that. You guys have done a very excellent job, very, very articulate. So starting the clock, and let's jump to the first question. So Mr. Cook Jr., thank you so much. We're going to read through the super chats first. Thank you so much for your super chat, Mr. Cook Jr. Totally appreciate it. And that really means a lot as we are kind of looking to improve on our software. So, I have to read this standing for truth. I know that you might not welcome it, but I have to be fair. He says, I don't want to be rude, but standing, you are not a scientist and you are extremely ignorant regarding what you're saying. Oh, and quit quoting Kent. So, as always, we'll give you a chance to respond, and then we'll move to the next question.
Well, I think a lot of times when, evolutionists can't actually address the evidence, for example, of, genome-wide degradation, created heterozygosity hypotheses, just to name a couple, 3 major mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, a lot of the times they can only scoff, they can only provide logical fallacies. So at the end of the day, anybody looking objectively should be able to see that the evolutionist has absolutely no argument. And a lot of times they'll say, hey, you're using Ken Hovind, arguments, you're using Dr. Nathaniel Jensen arguments, Dr. John Sanford arguments. I mean, evolution is just so easy to destroy. Pawns come to people evolution, that is. And you know what, if they want to believe that, say, dogs, banana plants, whales, and carrots are all related through common ancestry in light of the lack of evidence for it, that's fine with me. They have a right to their science fiction based religion, but if they're going to come on and debate and provide nothing but logical fallacies, that's all I can say about that. Thanks, brother.
So, got your question, frustrated atheist. Thanks for your patience on that. I missed it the first time around. And also, Tech Angel, thanks for subscribing. Glad to have you here. And for those of you who have subscribed earlier, I missed it, but I want to say thanks for subscribing and being a part of the community. We're glad to have you here. Whether you're Christian or atheist or one of the many strange creatures in between, we're glad you're here. So next, Jeremy Ike 1944 asks, ask Patient Beard how DNA codons evolved and organized themselves into threes or 3 codons without a designer. So let's see. And he's basically saying he wants empirical evidence. So we'll go with that. So thank you for that question, Jeremy. And if you want, I can read it again, because that's a mindful for me too. So, but if you got it, Jared, you can answer.
I'm not claiming to be any kind of an expert in biology, or any kind of expert, in any kind of very specific specialized field of evolution. I've done a lot of research on the broad strokes. So I guess the best answer I could give you is I'm not sure. I don't know. You'd have to ask a microbiologist or somebody who studies that specifically. And even if it still doesn't demonstrate that there had to be some kind of intelligence just because it did actually evolve, or just because it's here.
Gotcha. So next question.
And I thought, James, are we getting to respond to some of them?
You can, yeah. You guys both said you were okay with it, so it's fine.
I'll make it short and sweet. I think it comes down to, Occam's razor. I think it's obvious evidence for design. Maybe it goes back to 2 Peter 3. I'm not too sure. Look at alternative splicing. RNA can be spliced together in different ways to make different proteins. In this way, a single gene can give rise to tens of thousands of different proteins, and many of these proteins are tissue specific. So at the end of the day, these 3 codons that Jeremy asked Patient Beard here, they're highly organized, and only an amazing God can organize such complexity. So that's all I have to say.
Unless the other genes just weren't as good and died out.
Forgive me, just so we don't get into conversation, we've got to keep going to the next question. So Saint Dragon asks, hey, Standing for Truth, how come Christians prior to the 19th century never hold to the young earth creation view?
Well, I think if you look at all the different writings of, say the church fathers, quote unquote, or look at writings from Martin Luther, you'll find that a lot have held to a literal interpretation of Genesis, obviously. So I think that that's just a misunderstanding and a misrepresentation. So you can certainly go do your due diligence and read into this. But I think anybody with half a brain and one eye can read the Genesis account, for example, and conclude a young creation. They can conclude that, according to Genesis, apes and man are not related through common ancestry. And they can also conclude a global flood. And the fact that 2 Peter says that in the last days there's going to be scoffers denying those 3 things, well, the evidence, once again, from the Bible and science, empirical science, is consistent with a literal interpretation of Genesis.
Except that Genesis 1 doesn't agree with Genesis 2, so... That's all the answer I have to that question.
Well, I could answer that, but I don't think that that's the format here.
I know you got an answer. Sorry, Standing. I hate to cut you off.
I'll refrain.
don't worry. You'll get to talk a lot because you got a lot of questions for you. So, Brett Bernhoft, thanks for your question. He says, I have a question for this show. Oh, let's see. Okay, I think he means Standing for Truth, though. So he says, if Christians agree with evolution as a force of God, what role does free will have in this process? Brett, let me know if I was wrong about thinking that's for Standing for Truth, just in case, but my guess is it's for Standing. So go ahead, Standing.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question, James?
Yeah, he had said, if Christians agree with evolution as a force of God, what role does free will have in this process?
Sure. Well, I mean, once again, we have to define whether, what evolution means. No one disagrees with natural selection and random variation, random mutations, change over time. So I'm sure we've all gotten that by now. And if, I think the big word there is if, because if you're going to look at Genesis and take a literal view on it, for one, Genesis has been proven as, contrary to Patient Beard has said, I have sufficiently provided a strong biblical model that makes testable predictions. In regards to free will, if that type of fish to fisherman evolution is true, I'm not too sure. I certainly believe in free will, but I don't believe that that's the case. I believe Genesis in the entire Bible is quite clear that that type of evolution is not true according to the Bible and empirical evidence.
To be pithy, forgive me, Standing.
So I'm not too sure how to answer the free will part, though.
Gotcha. So, Jared, if you want to respond in a pithy way. Okay, you got it. James Downard asks, methods question to Standing for Truth. Do you fact check the source claims from the creationists you copy? And if so, please offer an example of what you did.
Okay, thanks for the question. All the, if you look at my slides, I had sources, papers that you can go to. If he's looking for specific sources, I do source check. You can look at the secular journals that this came from. I'll use one example. For example, mammoth populations were highly inbred and carried an elevated genetic load, likely contributing to their extinction, right, due to this mutational meltdown. So if you look at the source and you do your source check, this is exactly what it's saying. I'm sure the evolutionist is not going to agree that, okay, genetic entropy disproves, universal common descent and proves a biblical based model. They might just resort to, oh, well, this is inbreeding. But at the end of the day, inbreeding is like a sneak preview of where we are going genetically as a species. So sure, they're not going to have the same conclusion because we have different worldviews, but the sources are not being misrepresented as James Downard would have us believe. Thank you.
Next question. We have, thanks for that question, James, and thanks for the response, Standing. We have The Broken God asks, question for Standing for Truth, can you demonstrate genetic entropy between the Iceman, frozen about 4,000 years ago, and modern humans by examining the sequenced genomes?
Well, for one, the thesis of genetic entropy would be based on mutation accumulation. We're inheriting 100 to 300 new mutations per person per generation. So we're accumulating these mutations. This genomic-wide degradation would be at its worst now. So if we're looking at an Iceman from thousands of years ago, I don't know why we would expect that, he would be under more significant genomic degradation than modern humans today. So, that's kind of a silly question. But as I've demonstrated before, you can look at early human populations such as Homo neanderthalensis. You know what I mean? They were highly inbred. They had a very high genetic load, 40% less fit than modern humans. And this severe genetic degeneration probably contributed to the disappearance of that population. And all these early human populations are consistent with dispersion after Babel and isolation of populations, and these genetic mistakes were revealed. So certainly consistent with biblical-based model. Thanks, James.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And let's see. Next we have Stevie. I'll be right with your concern. And Riley, just 1 second. I'm going to ask the next question. So James Downard has a question, and that is for Standing for Truth. Does Standing for Truth think the, forgive me if I don't pronounce this right, probainogonathids were deliberately designed as a separate kind? And if so, why did God make them to match the evolutionary prediction of them?
Well, I think if you look to the model of pre-existing heterozygosity, and depending on how many created kinds that God actually created, and based on the segregation of these gene variants, recombination, mutations, there would have been such immense variety that if you're going to look at all these creatures, all this variety, this biodiversity, the evolutionists can certainly look at it in their biased worldview and based on their primary assumption that universal common ancestry is true, and conclude that, where can we fit this? What kind can we fit this? But as I said before, we have to look at genetic data, and that's what we're doing right now. We're only in the infancy of understanding the DNA language. So once we can sufficiently prove that, say across families, that these DNA differences are functionally unique, then we can start separating and distinguishing between kinds. Who's related and who's not related. So that would be my answer.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And next, CRISPR CAS9 asks, he says, let's see. It's not quite a question, forgive me. I think the next two we actually have. We have one for Patient Beard and one for Standing for Truth that aren't quite questions. If you're able to put it in the form of a question, CRISPR, I can kind of bump you to the front since I didn't state the rules at the start. Sorry about that. Jeremy Ike, 1944, asked Patient Beard how meiosis evolved and cut the DNA content by half during fertilization. I hope I didn't ask that. Again, he's saying like,
I'm gonna give the same answer as the last complicated biological question. That I think it's just kind of a repeat. You're just asking about a different part of the body that evolved, or a different step in the evolutionary process that evolved. And I'm not a microbiologist, so I can't give you the nitty-gritty details on it. You'd have to seek an answer from one of them.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And
I'll respond just 10 seconds to that. I think once again, obviously this amazing an obvious design. And on a surface level, if you're looking through a microscope at say a cell, some of it might be messy, but it's the intricate details of it. And based on our genome, based on the fact that, we know that the genes play roles in multiple overlapping codes, this profoundly reduces the probability of beneficial mutations. So at the end of the day, it all comes back to the fact that, yes, evolution is falsified, and the complexity of our DNA code is true. We should recognize, our amazing designer for what he has created. So maybe it goes back to 2 Peter 3 again. I'm not too sure. Thanks, James.
Gotcha. And next question, James Downard. He asks, do you claim any creationist documented these alleged degeneration and time track to 4,500 years ago for all the other animals allegedly on the ark?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat that? I'm sorry.
He says, do you claim that creationists documented these alleged degenerations and time track to 4,500 years ago for all the other animals allegedly on the ark?
Well, I think you can look at mitochondrial DNA rates, for example, and you can see that based on the mitochondrial DNA differences, it's more so consistent with a young genome, for example. And evolutionists have actually over-predicted the DNA differences in the mitochondrial DNA and under-predicted the differences in nuclear DNA. So I think if we're looking at DNA differences as a measure of time, that would be more consistent with a biblical-based model. If we're looking at genetic entropy and the accumulation of genetic mistakes or genetic mutations, I'm sure we can track that back. Even through the fossil record, you can see that everything was bigger, everything was better. You can look at certain animals, even look at a megalodon shark versus, say, a great white shark today. Obviously, something was different. You hear legends of the golden age. So I think genetic mutation accumulation, take that back in time and it fits like a glove. I'm not sure if, creationists are identifying exact, created kinds and how much accumulation and mutations was in their genome, but I think the evidence is pretty consistent. Thanks, James.
Gotcha. And next one is from CRISPR CAS9. This is for Standing for Truth. He says, epigenetic regulation requires underlying epigenetically responsive genetic elements. And given that these are subject to mutation, how can that not be open to evolution?
Well, epigenetics, for example, you can look at it as outside the genome. It's the study of changes in these species or even in living organisms, but it's caused by modification of gene expression as compared to the alteration of the actual genetic code itself. So if you look into epigenetics, most of it actually is evidence for biblical creation, to be honest with you, because a lot of these changes, a lot of this adaptation is based on epigenetic regulation. And at the end of the day, we are seeing genomic degradation on all levels, even on epigenetic levels, because a lot of these, we know autism's on the rise, cancers, autoimmune diseases, and it's hard to say that these are all solely based on mutation accumulation, and a lot of it's probably based on epigenetic degradation as well. So once again, epigenetics is more consistent with my model versus the evolutionary model. I can hear a lot of typing there, but
sorry about that.
No problem. That's the end of my answer there.
You got it. And thanks for your patience with me. Basically, I admit I missed your question, St. Dragon. But Riley S. to the rescue. Riley says, standing for, or on behalf of, so this is originally St. Dragon's question, for standing for truth, how come some early church fathers like Irenaeus, Justin Martyr, Augustine of Hippo, Origen, Clement of Alexandria didn't take the day of Genesis literally?
I'd have to look at all the writings, just like any argument. So, for example, let's look at a Protestant versus a Catholic debate. You can see in the examination section, the Catholic apologist is bringing up all these quotes from certain church fathers, and the Protestant apologist is bringing up certain quotes from other church fathers. So, at the end of the day, there's arguments from both sides, and we got to look at it as a whole. But at the end of the day, just open up your Bible, read what the Bible clearly says about a young creation, about obviously a global flood, and the fact that it's obviously not teaching that man who is made in the image of God is related to a chimpanzee or a gorilla. So that'd be my answer.
Gotcha. Thanks for your question there, St. Dragon, and thanks for the help, Riley S. And TomTom34B asks, good to see you, TomTom. Question for Standing for Truth. What would falsify the creation model or hypothesis/claim?
Well, I think, for example, if you could actually find a way to solve this this genome-wide degradation, because we know that beneficials cannot keep up with deleterious mutations, and we know there's a phenomenon called selection interference. These near neutrals should be virtually unstoppable. So if that problem could actually be sufficiently addressed, which I've had many debates, and maybe some of the more evolutionary heavyweights, say from the non sequitur show, if they want to step away from their comfort zone and come debate me on this and show me why genetic entropy is false, I'd love to do that. You got someone like Paul Gia making a video, but he won't come out and actually have a debate on it. So that's very telling. So that would falsify the theory. And if you, like I said already 4 times, the created heterozygosity hypotheses created DNA differences. We look to the genome for functionality. So if the majority of the genome is just useless evolutionary junk, or these pseudogenes are proven sufficiently to be, genomic fossils, then that would falsify at least that form of hypothesis as well. But at the end of the day, the biblical model is adaptable. So some may be falsifiable, and others we could certainly adapt it given the data.
You betcha. Thank you very much for that question, TomTom, and thanks, Standing for Truth. So Iron Charioteer asked both debaters, what is the explanation for iridium layer in the geostrata caused by the asteroid 65 million years ago?
He said me first. He said for both of the debate. He can start if he wants. I gotta.
Okay. Can you repeat that question one more time?
Since Jared hasn't talked for 5 minutes. Thanks. So Iron Charioteer asks, both debaters, what is the explanation for the iridium layer in the geostrata caused by the asteroid 65 million years ago?
I'm going to just go ahead and take his word that it was caused by an asteroid 65 million years ago. Like, it sounded like a self-answering question. Did I misunderstand that?
It might be. I think you probably agree on the age of the Earth. So ask both debaters, what's the explanation of and iridium is IRI, almost like the start of the word iris. So iridium layer in the geostrata caused by the asteroid 65 million years ago.
It sounds like the asteroid caused an iridium layer. I don't know what specifically. I'm assuming it was probably an iridium heavy asteroid that ended up dispersing across the planet after it hit. That's be my best guess. I haven't really researched that specific topic. I'd have to look that up a little more to give you a specific answer.
I think the answer is pretty simple in a biblical-based model. Geologic activity during the flood is readily explainable given a catastrophic plate tectonic model. That can produce iridium, say through volcanoes, because this model, this CPT model, has tons of volcanic activity associated with it, worldwide volcanic activity with it, actually. So there's actually nothing in the record that can't be readily explained through this model. Thanks, James.
You bet. And next up, Iron Charioteer. Oh, you just asked that, sorry. Okay. Tom Jump asks, question for Standing, what is the rate of genetic decay?
So the rate of genetic decay, you can actually, it's not really contested anymore that, we inherit 100 to 300 mutations per person per generation. That means, I'm more mutant than my children are going to be more mutant consistently than I am. So it's the accumulation. I mean, this generation alone has seen 700 billion mutations, because there's 7 billion people on the planet, and the fact that most of these mutations are actually in the non-selection zone, once again, demonstrates sufficiently the fact of genetic entropy. I imagine now that whether the rates are increasing, but I know that, post-creation, it would have been slower, and we can see that with the ages. And post-flood, it would have been faster based on the environmental changes post-flood. So that's my answer.
Gotcha. Next question. Thanks so much for your super chat, Sheepwork. Totally appreciate your support. And Sheepwork, if anybody was watching the other day, it was we had a debate on whether or not Christians keep the Old Testament law of the Tanakh, whether they should. And Sheepwork was Aaron in that debate. So good to see you, Aaron. And he asks, what takes more faith, evolution, or intelligent design, which could include a form of evolution?
Would that be for Patient Beard or myself first?
I think it's for both of us.
My guess is maybe both.
You can start if you want, brother.
I'll go first. I would say that it takes a lot of faith to believe in intelligent design, especially Standing for Truth's model, because he hasn't presented one. Evolution is a theory. We call it a theory because it's had evidence that has supported it for well over 200 years. And as I said earlier, our ability to verify scientific theories is in their ability to produce reliable predictions about reality, which translates into things like technology and other knowledge improvements that we can use in our day-to-day life. And like I mentioned earlier, we know more about evolution than we know about electricity and magnetism, and we use electricity and magnetism for to build computers and the internet and all this fun stuff that we're talking to each other on. So I don't think it takes I don't think it takes faith to believe in evolution, because we have evidence and we have predictions that have been made by the model there's been nothing in over 200 years that has falsified it. So since evolution is the evidence-based position, it does not, by definition, require faith.
Well, I appreciate Patient Beard's great zeal for his science fiction-based religion of pond scum to people evolution. But at the end of the day, the evolutionists have nothing but rescue device after rescue device. They can't explain this level of design that we see in nature, that we see in the genome. And neo-Darwinism lacks incredible explanatory power in regards to the origin of, phenotypic complexity, anatomical novelty, and the origin of non-gradual modes of transition. For example, abrupt fossil appearance. I want to hear an explanation on the Cambrian explosion, for example. So at the end of the day, if you're going to go from your single-celled organism to your multi-celled organism to your fish, amphibian, reptile, you're going to have to show me, incredible increases in novel information. And dogs produce dogs, elephants produce elephants. You can believe that dogs and elephants and banana plants are related through common ancestry, but that's not science. And I think that takes a great deal of faith to believe something like that. And I think Patient Beard has really demonstrated
scientist disagrees with the statement dogs produce dogs.
So let's see. So just to keep the conversation going, so we basically, Tom Jump asks, let's see, he's got a tripartite or trifecto follow-up. So thanks again for your help, Sheepwork. Glad to have you here. And Tom Jump, thanks for your question. His second is the rate of decay faster for asexual organisms? And that is for Standing for Truth.
is the rate of decay for asexual organisms faster?
That's all right.
I'd have to look at that specifically to see what the rate of decay on say asexual organisms are. So I mean, at the moment, I don't really have a quick answer for that.
Gotcha. Then science enthusiast. I think you're familiar with him standing for truth. He asks, why do humans have the gene in their DNA to produce egg yolk?
So I'm not too sure when he actually got into the debate, but I love that he brought that up since I actually specifically addressed that. So scientists, they're finding that numerous of these so-called genomic fossils are actually not pseudo after all, and these genes are necessary and required to sustain healthy life processes in the cell. So the broken remnants of an ancient chicken gene, the egg yolk gene, no such remnant exists, and instead the fragment appears to actually be a functional DNA element. You can look at the beta globin pseudogene, some of the whale pseudogenes, the gulo pseudogene. The gulo pseudogene might actually be a broken gene, but at the end of the day, I know people who have had a Chevy Cruze and a Honda Civic, and the air conditioner broke in the exact same way in both cars. Wow, that proves that they both evolved from a skateboard billions of years ago. I mean, that's how silly they are. And science enthusiasts, I got a debate with him on my channel. Go watch it. It was fun. I would love to do it again. So maybe he had his fingers in his ears when he heard me explain the ancient chicken gene example. But pseudogenes, junk DNA, overturned.
None of what you said really made any sense there.
I wouldn't expect it to make sense to you, no.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's that chicken gene. That's kind of how we notice large changes in species. Is we have a gene that will get broken. Oftentimes it'll be duplicated, and then one of them will be broken through a mutation, and then over time and generations, a different mutation will turn that gene on, and it will do something different. That's just a natural part of evolution, and that's just plain evidence of common descent. Is that we can look back and we can see that these things are identical.
Yeah, I just debunked that, but okay, continue. Actually, how much longer do we have there, James?
Let's see. As of now, we got about 6 minutes. So we've got, if we can keep being as short and pithy as possible, we'll keep trying to get through them. We've got a lot left. They just love you guys. So Tom Jump asks, we got that one. And he asked another one for Standing for Truth. He said, with that rate of decay, well, you didn't give an answer to that, so it kind of doesn't quite work. Sorry, Tom. Let's see. He would have said, with that rate of decay, how many generations will it take until life is no longer possible? And sorry again, Tom. I think he said he just wants to read more on that or something to that effect. Harry, thanks for your question, Harry. Glad you're here. He asks, Patient Beard, what he thinks of Christian evolutionists.
What do I think of Christian evolutionists?
Yep.
I'm just assuming he's talking about Christians who believe in evolution and an old Earth.
Yeah.
I think that if they're the type that seek the truth and are always researching, I would call them future atheists. That's just a personal opinion. That's part of what led me down my road. That it's so much angry God, the Bible, but
yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Theistic evolutionists are just one step closer to atheistic evolutionism, and I just don't understand, based on what we know about empirical data, based on say mutations and natural selection, the proposed mechanisms for this type of large-scale evolution. And when you look at the fact that these influx of deleterious mutations and maybe one or two rare occurrences of a beneficial mutation, I mean, there's no way that can compensate for the information loss. So there's just so much evidence against pawns come to people evolution that theistic evolutionists, I think most of them just don't really look at the data, and they kind of just want to fit in with with the scientific community, quote unquote. But there's no evidence to support the theory, so that's why it's not even a good hypothesis. It's just a religion at the end of the day.
Gotcha. And next, Jared having a snack. It reminds me of one time, Patrick ripped into you for that. You remember Patrick? All right, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the questions. Okay. John Peterson asks, Standing for Truth, could you please give a brief synopsis of your curriculum vitae, or CV? Thanks.
I'm sorry, brief synopsis of my what?
Curriculum vitae, like basically it's like the academic version of like a resume. So saying, could you please give a brief synopsis of your basically like academic resume?
So
scientific credentials.
My scientific credentials, my academic resume would be, I've studied science in college. I've taken 5 years of post-secondary education. I've studied extensively on the creation evolution debate and controversy. I've read a multitude of scientific papers. I think I understand it well. I think I understand it more than well enough to understand the major flaws and major problems with the theory itself, and also I understand the I guess evidence for, say, biblical creation based on a literal interpretation of Genesis. I don't think it's necessary to say exactly what I took in school. I mean, I think I don't think it's necessary in regards to the debate, but that'd be my answer. Thanks.
You got it. And thanks so much for your super chat. Sheepwork just came in, and he asks, does evolution have any problems? He wants an answer from both, and he says, be honest. So whichever one wants to start. Thanks for that again, Aaron. Totally appreciate it.
Well, I'll start by saying that what we have for evolution and what we have in terms of evidence makes it a very strong theory, and it's such a strong theory that science treats it as a fact. I don't know of any problems with evolution that I could bring up off of the top of my head, but I know that a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me have come to some conclusions, and other people who are smarter than them have not been able to disprove them on it. And like I said, at the end of the day, the model best explains reality, and we have successfully used that model to make predictions about reality. So based on our ability to use the model, I would say it might not be perfect, nothing is, but it's the best one we have, and it gives us the best results when we compare it to reality.
I would say that, it's not even a good hypothesis. I mean, there's absolutely no evidence for it. All the evidence that you get from, say, mutation-related changes or decay of prior information, you're not going to get your fish to fisherman that way. I mean, one strong example is linkage groups, Muller's ratchet. I mean, mutations in linkage groups, for example, they're linked basically forever. And so if you have lots of bad mutations, say, in that linkage group, that means that linkage group is reducing in fitness continuously based on, as I've talked about, accumulating deleterious mutations. And say you throw in one or two beneficials, just, give it to the atheists so they'll stop complaining. They're just going to get neutralized by the large numbers of deleterious ones. So this linkage, one of many evidence, is actually a killer and an absolute destroyer for particles to people evolution. This means that every linkage block is degenerate. So just one of many evidence against the religion.
Gotcha. So we have Tyler Durden asks, how does standing for truth... Oh, Zach W., thanks for subscribing, buddy. Glad to have you here. No matter what your worldview is, we are shooting for a diverse community, so glad you're here. And Tyler Durden asks, how does standing for truth compare the DNA of dogs and wolves to determine that they are related, and why wouldn't the same technique work to show broad common ancestry?
Sure. So you would look at the genetic differences, the DNA differences, whether you're looking at the mitochondrial DNA differences or the, say, the nuclear DNA differences, and depending on the whether it's low genetic diversity or lots of differences between them. Ultimately, the simple answer would be gene sequencing. And I think it's empirically evident that, wolves and domestic dogs are related based on the evidence, but there's no way to infer or extrapolate that to mean that, dogs and banana plants are related. And that's why I say evolution, the evolutionists, they hope, they imagine, and just like my my logo says, just imagine, because there's a whole lot of imagination taking place in the mind of the evidence. So the short answer, gene sequencing, genetic differences, crossbreeding, that's how you're going to get your conclusion.
Gotcha. And next we have Jim Majors. Thanks so much for your super chat. Totally appreciate it. Glad to have you here. And Jim Majors is also a past debater. We've had him here, and so that was an epic night with him and Jonathan Sheffield. And by the way, hold on, if I can plug this, I'm so excited for it. Jim Majors is coming back this Friday, and it's going to be to debate. He's defending his and his colleagues' organization, the Atheist Republic, the biggest atheist organization on the planet, I've heard. He's defending the organization against Max Dean Esnay. Red Pill Religion will be back, and he will be with Deflating Atheism, Rob from Deflating Atheism. So that is going to be epic. And so, again, thanks for your super chat, Jim. And Jim's question was, for Standing for Truth, he says, molecular biology can identify when species deviate from ancestors, like whales evolved from terrestrial herbivores 50 million years ago. Can your model stand to these standards?
Well, the thing is, what he says there, let's say if you're looking at the fossil evidence, well, it's just circumstantial evidence requiring an actual theory to account for it. And what we know about genetics disproves that right off the bat. And molecular analysis, if you look at the protein Preston, that actually puts whales and dolphins squarely with the bats. It's something called convergent evolution, which technically just has to do with inconsistencies and the lack of uniqueness of this phylogenetic tree. So then they try and explain these inconsistencies using the rescue device of convergent evolution, right? The appearance of the same trait or character in independent lineages. So in regards to whales, dolphins, and bats, they're the only mammals that have echolocation systems, James. So on the basis of even just gross anatomy, the whales and dolphins would be classified closer to the cow than to bats. So on the basis of their, echolocation systems, they actually belong with the bats. So strong evidence that this phylogenetic tree doesn't actually represent objective reality and actually falsifies universal common descent. So these bones found in the dirt, I'm not sure how they're interpreting them, but it's circular because it's based on an assumption that this theory is true, and what we know about it is that it's not true. So thanks.
Gotcha. And thank you very much, Justin James Hooman. Totally appreciate your super chat and glad to have you here. So he actually has a question for Standing for Truth. How did carnivorous plants arise?
So carnivorous plants, I think it all comes back to a biblical-based model, in that pre-fall everything was perfect, and after the fall introduced death, decay. So whether carnivory, in regards to animals or plants, occurred after this fact, I don't think it's really a problem at all, say, given the assumption of a biblical-based model, but it definitely occurred after the fall, along with all other death and decay. And since that's what we see in the universe and in the genome, wow, what more of a biblical model do you need? So thanks.
Next we have Tyler Durden, and he says, this is a simple question for Standing for Truth. What created kind is a rotifer? And let's see, if you don't know what a rotifer is, you're in good company. I have no idea what a rotifer is, but I'm pulling up a picture.
Does Patient Beard know what a rotifer is?
Let's see. So it's
I could
basically,
Google it, but I probably know what its a common ancestor is.
I'm on my other laptop, or basically, like, if you can imagine microscopic,
rotifer.
microscopic phylum, and basically like translucent. You know what I mean when I say microscopic. I'm on the other laptop pulling it up. Sorry about that. It's easy. It's just. So if you're familiar with rotifers, standing for truth, his question again, just a quick read it. So
yeah, I'm not too sure what kind rotifers are in, but that doesn't prove that rotifers in carrots and apples and whales are all related through common ancestry. So I'll look into that one and see if I can give him an answer. But that doesn't really help, I think, either model.
Gotcha. And with that, we have.
He asked what kind it was. He didn't ask which model it supported.
We're just about out of time, but let me read the question over again, just so that if I did make a mistake with that, I want to make sure I got it right. So let's see. He said, what created kind is a rotifer?
Well, it sounds like it's a type of microscopic
Pretty wicked
animal that is found in freshwater environments. And let me see. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I'll give the last words to Patient Beard here if he'd like, and then I think we can call it a night. It's been a lot of fun.
It's a part of the part of the unseeable kind, because when the Bible was written, they couldn't see it. Or we could put it in there with witchcraft and other things that made you sick when you didn't understand it. It's one of those kinds.
Hey, like I said, I appreciate your great zeal for your science fiction-based religion, but you can keep believing dogs and banana plants are related through common ancestry. It's not science, brother. It's just not science.
Got to wrap up. We totally appreciate both speakers. We appreciate all of your questions, everybody. Totally. Thanks for your super chat support as well, and every other way. I have to be honest, this channel, the reason it's good, well, first I have to say thank you so much to Jared and to Standing for Truth. The channel is like run on the research by the people who come on here and share the ideas, and so this is really, I can't say thank you enough for you guys, and also for your questions. And let's see. I hate to ask them to go over, John. I understand that. Like, I know we want to get to more questions. It's just that to respect their time, like they've already given a lot, and Standing for Truth is ahead of me. I'm in Mountain Time, and so it's really late, so I'm just kind of like, I know it's getting pretty late, and they might have to get up for work. So forgive me, but I want to say thank you so much for our speakers. We did do the whole 37 minutes and 5 seconds because Jared donated time to the Q&A. So that was a really fun Q&A, and so thank you guys.
That might have been the best question and answer yet.
Yeah, that was really exciting. So we totally appreciate it, and we are excited. We've got a lot of debates coming up to this week. In particular, we've got debates on God's existence, I think for sure tomorrow, and then we've got another debate this Friday, and we might have one on Saturday, one of which might even have Standing for Truth and a controversial guest, and as well as 2 atheists or skeptics who will be defending as well. So that's going to be very exciting as well. And if this is your first time here, I want to say thanks for coming by. We are looking for diversity. So if you are like, hey, I don't know if I agree with any of these people, maybe you're a Scientologist, but we're happy you're here because we don't have any Scientologists. We will basically, we like to have diversity, and we like to have people with different questions. And so this isn't like hey, we're gonna make fun of Scientology. We're like, hey, we're glad you're here if you're a Scientologist. I don't think we have any Scientologists. We've got, once in a while, we've got Ocean, who's a polytheist. We've got, I think we are gonna have a Satanist on soon as well. And so trying to kind of not become an echo chamber. That's a big deal to us. So anyway, thank you guys very much for being here. Again, the debaters, it's all you guys, and I'm confident hopefully we'll get to have both of them back if they're willing. And they've been friends of the channel and super supportive of the channel, so I can't thank them enough. Their links are in the description, folks. Check them out. If you're like, man, I just can't stand it, standing for truth. Well, you know what?
Love you, don't they?
You know what? You got a way with the atheists standing for truth. They just you know, a lot of them, they're firing a lot of questions at you tonight. Well, you know what?
Well, I was receiving too many emails that they were having SpongeBob SquarePants nightmares. And I love the evolutionists, you know what I mean? I mean, sure, they believe in an absolutely ridiculous religion, but at the end of the day, I changed my picture just for them. I don't want them to have nightmares anymore, James. So
we'll give Jared and Standing for Truth any last words before you go.
Yeah, I have one last thing to say. John Peterson asked in the chat, if nonsense is water, how many Olympic swimming pools would Standing for Truth's arguments fill? And my answer to his question is it would be water on a biblical proportion. Those are my final words. Have a good night.
My final words would be, I think anybody with one eye and half a brain could conclude that Patient Beard here probably addressed or rebutted 0.00001% of all the evidence that I actually provided. It might have just been a lack of understanding, so I'd have to forgive him for that.
So I might present a model to present evidence for it.
I thought you said that was your last words.
That was.
Anyways, I think
I've got to stop you, standing for truth. I'm sorry, buddy. I gotta stop you. But totally appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. I honestly hate saying goodbye because you have no idea. This is like the highlight.
I don't want it to end.
I know. But to respect your guys' time, I should let you go. So, for those of you in the Q&A, thank you so much for your questions and just being here, hanging out. Is always a good time. I honestly just get so stoked for this, and I'm in such a great mood, and I'm totally awake. And now I don't know how I'm gonna fall asleep. But anyway, thank you guys for being here.
Coffee.
Yeah. And with that, keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.